Well, welcome back to the Hot Seat. I'm delighted today to be joined by Natalie Pinon, who is Director of Development at NPT UK. Welcome, Natalie.
Thanks for having me.
So we're here at the OGH in Guernsey. We've got the networking dinner tonight. Be interested to hear a little bit more about NPT and your reason for travelling out to Guernsey today.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me. NPT stands for National Philanthropic Trust UK. We are a registered charity in the UK, and we are in the business of private client philanthropy. So we provide something called donor advice funds, which I can tell you more about. And the reason we're in Guernsey is we have many clients and advisors that we work with that use offshore structures to fund their donor advice funds.
And you've just got off the plane from Jersey. The team regularly travel as well to Switzerland and further afield as part of your work with other advisors and clients.
That's right. We have advisors, really we work with advisors in different parts of the world, but mainly I'd say offshore here in Jersey and Guernsey, Switzerland and the Middle East. So Dubai and the Gulf are really the countries that we focus on.
Fantastic. So the Donor Advice Fund, the DAF, it's a really interesting tool in the toolkit that more advisors, I think, should be aware of. Yeah. Perhaps you could just sort of break it down for people and explain a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. So a DAF is really an alternative to setting up your own charitable structure, whether that's a trust or a foundation. It's a very easy vehicle, very flexible vehicle that private clients are using more and more to manage their philanthropy. And essentially what it is an account that sits under an umbrella charity like NPT UK that enables donors to make contributions get tax relief once they've donated money in, given we are a registered charity, invest those assets or recommend that those assets are invested, and then whenever they're ready, and our reason for doing what we do, recommend grants to charities globally around the world when they're ready. Our job as NPT UK is to essentially manage that entire process. So take donors' recommendations on investments and grants and carry out the due diligence and the operational activity that's required to make sure that everything that's happening in those DAFs is charitable under UK law.
And under the DAF, a bank or investment manager that manages the client's broader affairs can be appointed to run those assets too. Is that right? So there's flexibility in terms of how those assets are managed, and they can be managed alongside other assets of the client.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's why we work with a number of wealth managers. So for NPT UK, any client that has a DAF over £500,000, they can appoint the investment manager of their choice, which means that, as you rightly said, the DAF assets can be held with the same manager, and they can continue to grow that philanthropic pot with the investment manager that they've chosen. So beneficial for both the donor, because they continue to work with the investment managers that they like, and for the investment manager, because philanthropic assets tend to grow over time. So.
And for the trustee community, sometimes different people providing structuring solutions can see themselves in competition, but you can work in a very complementary way with trustees here or elsewhere when they're looking for certain solutions. I mean, is part of your trip here to try and create that bridge to trustees to help communicate where the sweet spots for collaboration are?
Absolutely, yeah. That's right. We work with trustees here and in other parts of the world where they have clients that need different types of philanthropic vehicles. So a DAF might be a solution where a trust is not able to fulfill the philanthropic objectives, perhaps, of a particular family that may have set up a trust with a very specific objective, and now they would like to do something different. Perhaps they want to engage their children, or have a more flexible vehicle be part of that wider wealth planning, philanthropic planning structure. So yes, they can be complementary to trusts.
And what do you think about some of the latest trends in the philanthropy sector? I mean, the pandemic, we're in a moment of tough economic and political turmoil. Do you think that has encouraged wealthy families to think more closely about what they could do to benefit society, to help through very targeted, initiatives to harness the wealth that they've built?
Absolutely. I think the pandemic has really highlighted for everybody, but particularly for the wealthy private client community, the role that they can play in using their wealth for good. So, we certainly saw a big increase in individuals wanting to set up donor advice funds at the beginning of the pandemic to fund both very local initiatives. So, the fact that people were at home meant that they could get involved with their local communities, support the organisations that maybe struggled under lockdown, for instance, but then also bring forward some of the philanthropic plans that they may have had sort of in 10, 15 years time, and make those plans a lot more real today.
So it could be part of more of an accelerated succession plan to look at philanthropic giving alongside maybe transitions in the business or how assets are managed. There's a lot more emphasis today on impact investing and ESG styles of investing in the main portfolio, and I guess that naturally has a follow-on there for looking at charitable structures specifically.
Absolutely. We have a number of clients that will invest their DAF assets for impact, and then we also have a number of clients who are really being pushed by their children to do more with their philanthropic assets, to make those assets work harder. So impact investing and ESG investing has definitely increased within the DAF structures that we manage as well.
And what do you see from the Middle East? I know that you interact with some advisors there, or London-based advisors dealing with wealthy families out the Middle East. Are the same trends visible that you'd have dealing with a European family as compared to a family who's made and built wealth in the Middle East? What's your observation?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there are some differences. So we do work with large Middle Eastern families that may have their own philanthropic structures and foundations in their home countries, and they've been doing that for many generations, supporting their local communities and where they're from. And increasingly, as those families become global, as their children, move away or live in different parts of the world, we're seeing those families become more global in their giving as well. So setting up DAFs or other structures, being more strategic in how they think about long-term philanthropy, perhaps away from the countries that they were born and brought up in. So absolutely. And the same would go for some of the UK-based families that we work with. Families that have been philanthropic traditionally through the generations continue to be that way. But we also see with many individuals perhaps that have had a wealth event, an inheritance, a bonus, whatever it may be, setting up staff structures because they want something flexible and nimble that they can do today, not having to wait for years to come.
And also looking to the US, I mean, clients who are living in the UK with US connections, there's a lot of advantages to the charitable giving structures, the DAFs, for those US-UK taxpayers. Perhaps you could explain a little bit more about why it's useful for those clients who are in the UK.
So MPT in the UK has two separate charities. One of those is called MPT Transatlantic. That's a donor advice fund that is specifically for anyone that has US income. So US connected clients obviously have to declare and pay tax in the US. MPT Transatlantic is a dual qualified US-UK structure. Very beneficial for that group of clients, because what it does is enables them to get a gift receipt in the UK and the US when they're donating into that DAF, meaning that depending on their current situation or their tax position at the time, either could be helpful.
So you mentioned on the top the grant making side. So once money's been given, invested, and then to be distributed, there's a lot of obligations as to how you can send that money out and who can receive it. Perhaps you could walk us through the kind of due diligence you might do on the team before funds are released into charitable causes around the world.
Yes, so that I would say is one of the top reasons why people would choose to open a donor advice fund, because they were essentially outsourcing that part of giving, which can be quite complex and as legislation evolves is often changing as well. So at MPT UK, for UK or US registered charities, the due diligence is relatively straightforward because those are organisations that are registered with the Charity Commission, for instance. But for organisations that are outside of the UK, or indeed for organisations that may not be registered as charities but are charitable in nature, we have what we call an enhanced due diligence process. And what we're doing there is essentially making sure that the grant that's being recommended is charitable under UK law. That means operational and legal due diligence on that organisation, getting to know who they are, their governance structure, and also looking at their financials.
Okay, very interesting. And what's your assessment of the private wealth industry, the advisors, how much they kind of table philanthropy? PCD members commonly deal with clients who are multi-millionaires, billionaires. Do you feel that the industry does enough to communicate with those clients why philanthropy is important, what the tools are, how they can do it effectively? What's your read on how well the industry's doing?
I think the private client industry has evolved, certainly. When I first started working in private client philanthropy, I think private client advisors were perhaps not equipped to have the philanthropy conversation with their clients. I do think that's changing as we talk about philanthropy more and more, and indeed as clients themselves are going to their advisors to ask for help and support. So I do think it's changed. I think particularly in the wealth management industry, that industry has really now understood that private client philanthropy is a big part of their business. So most private wealth managers now will have a philanthropy practice, people who are there to bridge between, for instance, a DAF provider like us and their clients. So I do think it has changed. I would love it if it was even more engaged from the private client advisor perspective, but I do think that's changing, and I'm encouraged by discussions like this where we can talk about philanthropy and DAFs.
And have you seen, I suppose then, individual bankers who are both passionate about philanthropy but seeing the commercial benefit to actually a broader engagement with clients, perhaps networking that they didn't have access to, or it's bringing them new relationships that by taking a bigger view, bigger picture view, they've actually built a good business? And I guess you must come across these people who you're interacting with.
Absolutely. We find that those that quote unquote get it, you know, will know that engaging in the topics of philanthropy means that they get to know maybe a different side of their client's life, something they didn't know about their client. It enables them to build longevity in the relationship with their clients, because often clients will want to involve the next generation, their children, in those conversations. And over time, really what it does, I think, is grow the philanthropic pot that's there when clients might be donated non-cash assets, for instance, or alternative investments, things that may not be traditionally invested, but that come into play when we're talking about philanthropy and succession.
And for legal and tax advisors, there's clearly a tax advice piece and a legal piece around introducing the concept of a DAF. But have you seen, traditionally, I suppose lawyers might have thought about setting up a charitable trust. It's something they know, it's an instrument they can set up. How do you find getting a dialogue going with those who are originating structures and how they fit this into their toolkit and mentality?
Again, I think the private client legal world has also changed quite a lot in the last few years. Whereas they might have been proponents of setting up charitable structures in the past, I think they've increasingly come to understand that their clients want something flexible. They might necessarily not want to wait to set up a structure for 6 months, for instance, if you're registering with the Charity Commission. And many lawyers are now keen, I suppose, to help their clients with more flexible solutions, because, as you rightly said, that means that they will, continue to engage with their clients, deepen the relationship with their clients, give their clients what they want.
Wonderful. Well, look, Natalie, great to talk to you. Look forward to seeing you later for our dinner event and sharing this interview with our members.
Thanks very much, David. Thank you.